In a quiet cafe nestled on the outskirts of town, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee hung in the air, mingling with the murmurs of patrons. Among them sat Sarah, a former CIA agent enjoying a peaceful afternoon. Little did she know, fate had other plans. Outside, a group of bikers roared in, their raucous laughter filling the serene atmosphere. Unbeknownst to them, they had chosen the wrong target for their amusement. Sarah's demeanor shifted subtly. Years of training and instinct kicked in. As the bikers swaggered into the cafe, their boisterous energy clashed with Sarah's calm resolve. Eyes met, tension crackled. With a steely gaze, Sarah's next move remained unseen, leaving a palpable anticipation hanging in the air. The cafe fell silent as the bikers, clad in leather jackets and radiating confidence, approached Sarah's table. One of them, a burly man with a smirk that spoke of mischief, leaned in too close. "Mind if we join you?" he asked, his tone laced with mockery. Sarah didn't flinch. She calmly folded her book, placing it on the table, her sharp eyes scanning the group. What they couldn't know was that Sarah wasn't just any woman. Her years in the CIA had honed her into a master of observation, strategy, and self-defense. Every detail of the scene, their movements, their demeanor, even the exits, was already etched in her mind. The leader chuckled, mistaking her silence for fear. But Sarah's calm expression hid something they wouldn't anticipate. A storm waiting to be unleashed. The leader pulled out a chair and sat down uninvited, his friends following suit, filling the space with nervous chuckles and unnecessary bravado. Sarah's eyes remained steady, her body language controlled. She didn't rise to their bait, but she didn't shrink away either. "Not much of a talker, huh?" Another biker sneered, drumming his fingers on the table. The tension grew thicker with every passing second, but Sarah let it simmer. They were trying to intimidate her, but what they didn't know was that she had faced threats far more dangerous than this. A barista behind the counter hesitated, unsure whether to intervene. A few other patrons exchanged uneasy glances, sensing the unease but staying out of it. Sarah's focus remained razor-sharp, calculating her next move as the leader leaned in closer. "So what's your story?" he teased. She smirked faintly, finally breaking her silence. "You don't want to know," she said in a tone that made the air seem colder. The bikers laughed, brushing off her words, but a flicker of doubt crossed the leader's face. Outside, the roar of motorcycles left idling added to the tension. What no one in the cafe realized was that Sarah wasn't just sizing them up. She was already a step ahead, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal just how wrong they had been to choose her. The leader's smirk faltered as Sarah leaned back in her chair, completely unbothered by their presence. Her calmness wasn't just unsettling, it was unnerving. The air grew heavier, the tension palpable. One of the bikers, younger and more impatient, slammed his hand on the table. "We're just trying to have some fun, lady." "Why so serious?" Sarah's gaze shifted to him, slow and deliberate. Her silence wasn't passive, it was calculating, commanding. She noticed the subtle twitch in his hand, the overconfidence in his voice masking a crack in his resolve. From the corner of her eye, Sarah caught a glint of something shiny on the leader's belt, a blade perhaps. The detail didn't alarm her. If anything, it confirmed what she already suspected. This wasn't a casual encounter. They wanted trouble. The cafe doors swung open as a delivery man entered, momentarily breaking the tension. Sarah used the distraction to subtly adjust her position, ensuring she had a clear view of the exit and the bikers' movements. "You were awfully quiet," the leader said, his voice lower now, more probing. "You're not scared, are you?" His words were a challenge, but Sarah didn't bite. Instead, she gave him a cold, knowing smile that made him shift uncomfortably in his seat. The bikers exchanged uneasy glances, their bravado beginning to waver. Something about her wasn't adding up. As the seconds ticked by, the room seemed to shrink, the tension coiling tighter like a spring about to snap. The leader leaned back in his chair, feigning confidence, but his hand hovered too close to his belt. Sarah noticed. She wasn't the only one observing now. The barista had picked up on the tension and quietly stepped into the back room, possibly to call for help. A few patrons edged closer to the door, their conversations reduced to nervous whispers. Then came the sound that shifted everything, a low beep from Sarah's watch. She casually glanced at it, her expression unreadable, but the bikers noticed. "What's that?" one of them demanded, his tone sharper than before. Sarah didn't answer. Instead, she reached for her coffee and took a slow sip, deliberately ignoring them. Her silence was louder than any words, her calmness unsettling. The leader's patience snapped. "What are you hiding?" he growled, leaning forward again. Before Sarah could respond, a second, louder beep echoed, this time from outside. The bikers froze, their bravado faltering as the sound of engines idling grew louder. Sarah's eyes flicked toward the window. Two black SUVs had pulled up, their dark windows reflecting the sunlight. The doors opened in unison, and several men in tactical gear stepped out, scanning the area. The bikers exchanged panicked glances, their tough facades starting to crumble. "Who are they?" one whispered, his voice barely audible. Sarah finally spoke, her voice calm but laced with an edge. "I told you, you don't want to know." The leader's face turned pale as he realized they were no longer in control. Whatever game they thought they were playing, it had just taken a dangerous turn. The cafe was tense, every pair of eyes fixed on the scene outside. The bikers shifted in their seats, their confidence evaporating as the men in tactical gear approached the entrance. The leader stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "What's going on?" he barked, his voice shaky now. Sarah calmly set her coffee cup down and stood, her movements measured. "You wanted to know my story," she said, her voice cool and steady. "Well, here's a piece of it." The door swung open, and one of the men entered, his face unreadable behind dark glasses. "Agent Harper," he said, addressing Sarah with professional formality. The bikers froze, their eyes widening as realization dawned. She wasn't just someone who could handle herself. She was someone with authority, someone they never should have crossed. The leader tried to backtrack, his voice stumbling over excuses. "We didn't mean any harm, just messing around, you know." Sarah stepped closer, her piercing gaze locking onto his. "You picked the wrong person to mess with," she said firmly. "Now sit down." The bikers obeyed, their arrogance replaced by fear. As the men escorted the bikers out, the tension in the cafe finally eased. Sarah picked up her coffee again, sipping it as if nothing had happened. But as she turned back to her table, she noticed something. One of the bikers had slipped away unnoticed. A small smirk crossed her lips. She had let him go on purpose. After all, some loose ends were more useful when left untied. As the cafe returned to its usual hum, Sarah sat back down, her focus shifting to the half-read book she had set aside. The staff and patrons, still shaken, watched her with a mix of awe and curiosity. It was as if they were seeing her for the first time, realizing there was far more to the quiet woman with the sharp gaze. Outside, the black SUVs drove off with the bikers in tow. Only the faint rumble of the lone motorcycle that escaped lingered in the distance. Sarah didn't seem concerned. She knew the one who got away wouldn't forget this encounter, or her. Finishing her coffee, she left a generous tip and walked out, her movements unhurried. For Sarah, this was just another chapter in a life filled with stories no one would ever believe.